Pronto, você está no lugar certo.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Marcos Gouveia de Souza. I'm here in São Paulo, Brazil, Thursday, 9 a.m. Today it's a holiday here in São Paulo. Our subject this morning here involves what is going on in the mobile payment world. Probably the best global reference is what is going on in China, where 86% of all payments are made by mobile, and 94% of these payments are made through two major platforms, WeChat Pay and Alipay. Last year, Facebook take advantage of the 2.4 billion users worldwide, try to launch Libra, that could be a mobile payment platform using a connection involving almost 30 different brands and companies, part of a huge alliance to try to launch. But they were obliged to return because central banks, particularly in Europe, were prohibiting to launch this global cryptocurrency. In Brazil right now, we have a very unique situation. 2 weeks ago, Facebook tried to launch in Brazil a platform, the WhatsApp platform, payment platform, but was also prohibited by central bank in Brazil because central bank here is preparing to launch next November Pix, the Brazilian official digital platform. And almost 1,000 companies are right now preparing to be part of this launching. But no doubt, what we are seeing in terms of mobile and digital payments is changing dramatically the market, the retail, consumer behavior, the whole structure of the financial system. And this is our main focus for the session we'll be moving ahead right now. We're going to start with 3 great panelists helping us to introduce the subject and to discuss what is going on. Our sequence will involve an initial presentation for each of them, talking a little bit about himself and about the company they are managing. And after that, we will continue in a debate, sharing questions among us. We're going to start, we have with us today, Daniele Coda, Head of Marketing, Cards, and Digital Payments from Nexi, that is in Milan right now. Sam Yan, or Larry, Vice President of PAX Technology in China. He is in Beijing right now. And Cleveland Brown, CEO and founder of PayScout, and Cleveland is in LA, Los Angeles, USA right now. Okay, let's start with Daniele with his initial presentation, a little bit about himself and Nexi. Please, Daniele.
Thank you very much, Marcos, and good afternoon, good morning to everyone that is online right now. Great pleasure to be here with Campus Party. So myself and Nexi, as Marcos correctly stated, Nexi is an Italian company. We define ourselves as the paytech, a leading paytech on the Italian system. We facilitate payments, digital payments, both on the issuing and on the acquiring side. I'm the head of marketing, both for consumer and commercial products. I have an extensive experience across different regions, both in Europe and North and South America. Nexi, together with other European countries, is trying to push the use of digital payments. And the answer to this is quite simple. We try to improve customer experience. We try to improve the experience during purchasing, both for cardholders, or if you will, people that are paying, companies which need to pay for their everyday purchases, so B2B transactions. And on the other side, mostly important is facilitating the acceptance of these mobile payments. Because I think one of the biggest problems in Italy and in some countries, especially in Southern Europe, is the acceptance of mobile payments. We've seen a great push forward of mobile payments, and Nexi is at the forefront of that. So Nexi enables the banks, Italian banks, because Italy is quite a fragmented market. You have probably over 250 banks, and that's pretty much unusual for any Northern European country and in many other well-established economies. We see that in Italy, we have a great take-up of mobile payments. Over the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen an increase of about 8% CAGR. And this is primarily vehicled by the schemes, the traditional 4-party schemes and 3-party schemes, and the investment that Nexi is doing in the market, facilitating micropayments. We need to remember that Italy is a cash-heavy economy. Almost 80%, 75% of transactions are performed with cash, but we're slowly seeing a good push against that. There's many different reasons why cash is king in this market. Legacy, control, fear of being, let's say, robbed in that sense. And the other side is fiscal reasons and being able to avoid what is fiscal pressure on merchants and businesses. So in a nutshell, just to conclude, is Nexi is a paytech, and that's kind of translating what fintech stands for today. So we enable all sorts of payments, from consumer payments, commercial payments, acceptance, and corporate banking payments.
Thank you so much, Daniele. Cleveland, straight from LA to the world.
Thank you. First off, it's definitely a pleasure to be here. I wish that I could have seen everyone in person. I was on my way to see everyone and be able to have a chance to really just be there and feel the vibe with all of the students there at Campus Party. But I'm not. I'm here in Los Angeles, and it's really good to see you. So a little bit about myself, really quick. I'm the CEO and co-founder of PayScout. Just a little bit on my background. I was born and raised in Silicon Valley, so I literally have Apple and IBM DNA running through my veins, and really look at payments through an innovation technology lens that's really lent credibility to building PayScout. And PayScout, what we are is we're a global payment processing platform. We connect businesses to consumers through credit, debit, checks, alternative payment networks throughout the globe. We have partners like Visa, MasterCard, UnionPay, Cielo, large global fintech partners where we're able to support payments and connect consumers everywhere. And when we think about payments, it's such an exciting time for young people, right? And the reason why I say this is that what we do is we make fintech possible through making payments a secure and frictionless process. And we tend to forget about the payment piece, and we're going to talk, a little bit later here about mobile. But if you imagine a relay race, when you look at the ecosystem of goods and services, you have this, imagine a relay race where you have manufacturing and they're passing the baton to sales, and they're selling these goods and services, and they're passing it to logistics where there's delivery of goods and services. But that last piece of that race, that last leg, it's payments. And it's taking payments and creating a frictionless way for people to get paid for their goods and services. And the way we look at payments is we look at payments as a connective tissue. It's very organic, and it allows people of all cultures, ages, religions to build economic and social networks throughout the world. And it's going to take a little time. And what I'll do is I'll focus a little bit on history as well. Throughout time, whether it was Rome, the Roman trade and the Roman abacus, the Silk Road in Asia, the Maya exchange systems in Latin America, the Amsterdam Dutch cashiers that built check products, Visa, MasterCard, building plastic networks and electronic commerce. And now we have global e-commerce and m-commerce. And these are all powerful mechanisms that have helped civilizations thrive. And to be part of that, that's why I'm here, is I want to be able to share how exciting that is. It's not just payments. It could be a very mundane subject, but it's connection. And each of these have provided a frictionless way to conduct business, socialize, build economic relationships through their respective times in history that lead us to now. And I have a little something to present in terms of how we see this evolution. I know we might be pressed a little bit on time. So what I'll do is I'll pass this to my colleague here to introduce himself and company. And if there's time, I'll take a moment to talk a little bit about the evolution of where we're at today and how we see the future of payments.
Thank you so much, Cleveland. It's your turn, Larry, straight from Beijing. What you could talk to us about PAX and yourself.
Thank you, Marx. Hello, everybody. Greetings from Beijing, China. I hope you're well. I'm the Vice President of PAX Technology. PAX Technology is a company that focuses on electronic payment devices and solutions for the last 2 decades. We are among the leading position in the whole world in terms of the payment devices. We have a full portfolio of payment devices from card readers to post terminals to kiosks, smart terminals, and software on the devices and software on the host. Today we cover over 100 countries in the whole world. We have a wide deployment of over of tens of millions of devices in different countries, in different systems. We started from China, but now we operate on a global scale. I am personally working in this company for 20 years already. So I personally witnessed all the major migration in the electronic payment business. I'm very glad to have this chance to share some ideas, some experiences that I have with you guys here. As Marx mentioned that in China, we have probably the highest penetration of mobile payment. So maybe we can share some interesting phenomena, ideas during this session. In my personal opinion, I see that in today's electronic payment, some major trends. First of all, is the security. People always keep security first, especially in the electronic payment field. Security is like the base of everything else. The next point is convenience. Today's payment methods are much more convenient than it has been in the past. With the new technology introduced, we use NFC, we use QR code, we use new cardholder verification methods, like PIN, like a PIN, like a facial information and other biological information. All these increase the convenience of the transactions. The next is mobility. Today, everything goes mobile, and people spend most of the time on the mobile phones. So it's natural for people to pay through their mobile phones. That's the I think the main thing that we're going to discuss here. Also, I see that with today's improvement in the devices, we have much more chances, much more opportunities to integrate business with payment. In the past, that when you did a payment in the past, you only pay. But today, on the device, you don't just pay. In fact, you have all your business logic in the terminal device. The computation power of the devices allow you to put all your maybe not all, but a lot of your business logic on this device, and you can integrate your business logic with payment in one spot, in one place. Another trend that I see is the strong migration to cloud. Actually, this is there is one thing that a lot of things migrating from devices, from terminals to the cloud. In the past, that people focus a lot on the security of the devices they're using. But today, a lot of these security measures actually are moving to the backend, to the cloud. So this is, I see, another trend in the technology in terms of payment. That's basically what I have to say about the introduction.
Okay, thanks so much, Larry. Let's return to Daniele. We have a clear sensation that Italy is now at a turning point in terms of new consumer behavior and attitudes versus digital payment. What is going on in Italy right now?
Well, I think, Marcos, and just to touch point with what my colleagues have just stated, Italy is at a clear turning point in, if you will, thanks to what is happening with COVID as well, right? So as I said before, 80%, 75% of transactions are made by cash. Customers, however, are feeling the force of globalization. They're feeling the force of making transaction with streaming, entertainment, home fitness, e-learning, ordering over Amazon, ordering takeaway. So you need digital payments to do this. And less merchants are accepting cash as a way of payment. So this means that customers need to adopt to these trends. And Italy is probably one of the biggest countries in the world for prepaid products. And we're trying to move away from this. And in fact, Italy probably represents the majority of Asian market for prepaid cards. And that's strange because we are 60 million people in Italy. However, debit cards, credit cards, wallets are starting to shift, and they're starting to become everyday vehicles for people. And what is doing that as well is physical merchants. So physical merchants are finally understanding that because of the new way of living, especially because of COVID-19, they have to adapt. They have to adapt on their supply chain structure. They have to go and collect their payment elsewhere. So Nexus launched something called Pay by Link, or having a smart POS instead of a standard POS, where you can actually digitalize a lot of what you're doing. So when you're going to a restaurant, for example, now that things are reopening, you can order a taxi for a client directly from the POS, or the contactless. Contactless has grown 60% year on year in Italy just because merchants are taking the card from the customer and just putting it on the POS machine. So things are starting to pick up, and people are starting to understand that actually digital payments are a secure way of paying, not handling cash, and moving forward. And what is more, the government is investing a lot on this. Recent news is that the Italian government are lowering the amount of cash payments you can do. January 1st, you will only be able to pay 1,000 euros in cash. And the other initiative that the government is putting forward is a receipt lottery. So for those people that pay with cards. So simply that means try your fortune, pay by digital means, and you may win cash or you may win something. Now, that may seem a fight against cash. It is. There is also fighting the black market, and that's fundamental for a country like Italy.
Okay, thank you, Daniele. Cleveland, let me ask you, trying to figure out about what is going on worldwide, what, in your opinion, are the main drivers to define the mobile and digital payment penetration speed in each market?
That's a loaded question. Let me try to answer that there. So when we look at globalization, I think there's payments it's an interesting place because we have to look at commodity. It's a commoditized product in a lot of people's eyes, and you have to have differentiation when it comes to delivering a good and service. So what's the rate globally that we get this acceptance? And we look at globally how business is conducted is through what we call an API driven economy. So whatever business that people are in, they're going to have a connection of different technologies connected through APIs to ultimately deliver in this environment. So with that said, you have and Daniele said it very eloquently, is that you have this transition of point of sale globally moving into these e-commerce and m-commerce environments. So how do we get there? Well, we're going to get there through one, the biggest issue that he brought up is the security. That's number one. Number one is how do you move from this environment where you're in person and secure transactions? How do you do that in a compliant way? And how do you protect people's information, right? Because what we're seeing globally is information and the protection of information. You have GDPR in Europe. You have a lot of things happening in the US where they're adopting these standards to make payments secure and at the same time protect people. So in this API economy, what do we need? We need banking partners, very, very critical. So as banks, they're not really seen as innovators, but what they do very well is, from a regulatory standpoint, secure transactions. So how do we get there? Fundamentally, is that we need to take banks, build a bridge of technology with banks so they can, through an API, blend into these products and services so that from a global scale, we can weed out all of the bad actors that exist and make sure that payments are moving in a secure way and having proprietary technology to get there. There's three fundamental things that have to happen, and we call them the 3 C's. You have to have better conversions. Whatever technology is going to bring, you have to have conversions that are going to bring more customers, more payment methods, increased authorizations. That's the first C. The second is compliance, as I talked about, reducing scope, protecting information, having fraud and risk engines as part of that API economy. And number 3 is cost. How do we make sure globally that we're optimizing the cost of transactions and building models that make sense for each particular business type?
Thank you, Cleveland. For sure, these 3 C's are going to be part of the main insights of this session. Larry, China, Singapore, Thailand, South Korea, Vietnam, how and why mobile payment became so important in the Asian countries?
I think this is a very interesting question. Because when people talk about mobile payments, people always first look at China and then Southeast Asia, because these places are the places where mobile payments are the most widely used. If we look back on the fact how Alipay and WeChat started this move in China, we can conclude that there are several key elements for the success. First of all, they had the ability to get through to the bank. Even before the mobile payment was started, they had the connections to the commercial banks already. Especially in case of Alipay, everybody knows that they run the online market, Alibaba, and they have their payment system, online payment system, long time before the mobile payment was widely accepted. So they had connections to basically all the banks in China already. Similar thing happened with WeChat Pay as well. I think that's one of the first evidence that they can start this campaign. Secondly, I believe you sure need some giant players in this field, because to do this, you need to build the infrastructure from scratch, and in fact, you need to compete with the legacy system. When you talk about legacy system, you're talking about actually the giant, in fact, in this field, the bank, the payment networks, and these companies, they have a lot of resistance in adoption of new payment methods, and certainly to educate the users, these companies, they need to invest a lot of money to make incentives to the users. In fact, even today, WeChat Pay and Alipay are still investing huge money to provide incentives both for the merchants and for the users. For example, you can easily get discount if you pay by, for example, Alipay or by WeChat Pay to buy anything in the market. And for the merchants, the commission level is much less than traditional banking cards. So they're still investing money for this. And another very important point is the government regulations. When new methods of payment are introduced, a lot of concerns are always raised about security, about convenience, a lot of different opinions, discussions. So the government needs to decide whether it's safe to go, and if there's risk, the government needs to take this risk. And for example, in China, in fact, there was huge debate to allow the QR-based payment. It was first tried, then banned, then allowed. So the government needs to play a great role there. Another element that I personally believe that the widespread of mobile payment in China and other Southeast Asia countries is probably because that in these countries, actually the traditional payment networks were pretty weak. In fact, credit cards and even debit cards were not so widely used, and payment networks were not strong enough before these new methods were introduced. I believe that's why the mobile payment took place so quickly and grew so fast in the east part of this world. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Larry. Daniele, back to you. We have been following the information, and we realized that your company works very hard on innovation and payment instruments, which are the main frontier on which you are currently working on.
Well, I'll touch base with linking to what Cleveland was saying before. So as Nexi is a paytech and it works with the banks to provide payment solutions, the fundamentals that we bring to the market is integrating with the banks and making them faster and leveraging their security measures like fraud systems, AML checks, KYC. So all of these are fundamentals for Nexi, but the core offering is all around facilitating customer experience. I'll give you some examples. So on the issuing side, which is obviously providing consumers or businesses means for payments, we're focusing a lot on instant lending or the possibility of create installments on their purchases. This is fundamental in a situation post-COVID, for example, or in the last couple of years where digital transactions have been growing. And when you tend to make a large transaction, you may want to have the flexibility to install that transaction. So that's one thing on the consumer side. Same way goes for having a flexible credit line, right? So maybe I only need 1,000 euros this month, or maybe I need 2,000 euros this month. Now, from a legacy perspective, that has always been controlled by the banks. But what if we give the control to consumers if they're credit worthy, right? So maybe being able to increase or decrease that. On the business front, being able to provide working capital to businesses. So businesses today have to pay their invoices with their purchase orders. And typically you would have a 60 to 90-day agreement with their supplier. But in the same way, you would have to impact on your liquidity. So to avoid that, why not use digital payments instead of just a normal wire transfer, which is impacting on the funds you have available. But the most important piece, I guess, is how you attract digital payments, and that is on the merchant side. So on the merchant side, we're doing a number of different activities. We are enabling merchants to be able to send out links for payments, so you can use cards or any other ways of digital wallets. We are strengthening our partnership with e-commerce platforms to provide e-commerce payment systems. So if you can imagine, I don't know, any kind of website has developers which are designing websites and need an e-commerce integration, but we will be at the forefront of that partnership. Same way, how do we enable large merchants like large retailers, supermarkets, airlines, or things like this, to be able to have a smooth experience for payment and provide all the assistance and tools to be able to do that. So Nexi is doing all of this, right? And is looking at how giants like Amazon, Apple, Google are reinventing the peer-to-peer movement of money. And as such, I think what we've seen in the last year is a growth of 120% of mobile registrations, and 1 in 2 of those new registrations are really active. So they're really using their devices, so using their smartphones, using their tablets to perform a transaction. And these are important numbers for a country like Italy, where I was saying that 75% of transactions are usually on cash. So you see how habits are changing.
Okay, great. Cleveland, you mentioned the lack of innovation from the traditional banks. Do you believe that these guys, traditional banks, will be losing market share in the near future when the mobile payments share will increase in the different markets worldwide?
So if we talk about market share, there's different. It's a relative, I guess, a relative term. So the short answer would be no, because you need a regulatory infrastructure to make all of this happen. you have to be able to protect the global economy fundamentally. So those fundamentals have been historically given to financial institutions. I think what we're seeing within financial institutions, I talked a little bit about the API economy, is that the financial institutions are partnering now with innovators and innovative companies to be able to close the gaps that exist within their infrastructure when it comes to connecting to their customers, right? So they can't, historically what they've done is they've really gone at it alone. What they're going to do now is partner with companies like PayScout. That's exactly what we do. We partner with financial institutions in order to build that bridge so they can better service their customer. So, you know, everything that Daniele talked about and Sun talked about, I mean, there's one word to sum that up. It's omnichannel, right? So the omnichannel experience is now going to include banking, right? It's not just payments. It's not just mobile. It's not just e-commerce. It's not just point of sale. What we have now is that API-driven economy is going to take all of these different elements, banks being on the forefront of that from a regulatory standpoint. As you talked about earlier, Marcos, what happened with the central bank with PIX systems, exactly what we talked about. It doesn't matter how well you innovate at the end of the day. If you're not in line with the regulatory infrastructure, you're not going to get there. So banks are going to continue to exist. They're just fundamentally figuring out how to evolve in this new environment. And they're doing it. They move a little bit slow. We all know that, but we see that speeding up now because they're pressed. And why are they pressed? Because the omni-channel is now making them have to innovate, right? We can't just use cash. We can't just use a check. We can't just use a card. You know, just a quick note, we're the first company in the world to have a transaction happen in virtual reality. So, you know, when we talk about how things are moving, we have goods and services happening in mediums that we call bleeding edge for goods and services that banks have to adopt, and the omnichannel has to adopt to. So it's a great question. I can answer that in 3 sessions probably, but banks aren't going anywhere. Banks are just going to have to change how they do business.
Okay, great. Larry, what happened in China is so peculiar. 2 major business ecosystems, Alibaba and Tencent, through the mobile systems, WeChat Pay, Alipay, they were able to track consumer behavior and use this data to spread business to different areas, taking advantage of the knowledge they got from monitoring this information. Do you believe that in other countries could happen the same? Or let's say central banks will try to control that to avoid the situation that is happening right now in China?
That's a very interesting question. As Cleveland just said, I totally agree with him that the innovations actually are not intended to replace the financial institutions. The companies like Alipay or WeChat Pay, however big they are, they actually work together with the banks, follow the regulations from the central banks. So I believe in any other country, if you want to do the same thing, you need to follow the same regulations. You cannot to use your innovations to walk around the regulations. It won't happen. Specific to your question, as I just mentioned before, that Alipay and WeChat Pay actually they had their genes to succeed. For Alipay, they had their online market. They had their payment system working closely with e-commerce. So they had a huge user base, and it was easy for them to transfer these users into mobile payment users. For WeChat Pay, from the other hand, they had and they have now huge base of users of their instant messenger, and they have a great ability to attract these people to use their payment service as a value-added service. So I believe that these two trends actually are happening in other places as well. For example, in Southeast Asia, there is another instant messenger called Line, which is similar to WhatsApp or WeChat, which is also very popular in Southeast Asian countries. And they also introduced Line payment, which works exactly the same way like WeChat Pay, and it's very popular in those countries. And in India, they have another system called Paytm. Paytm actually is very similar to Alipay. In fact, today this company was acquired by Alipay already. But before that, they were operating in a similar way like Alipay. They took advantages of their marketplace, and they also successfully attracted their online payment users to use their mobile payment service. So I believe these kind of things can happen in other countries as well. But if we look at the reality, we do have some privacy concerns in the United States or in Europe. People are more concerned about privacy, and maybe in these places, technologies and solutions that with less, let's say, with less intrusion can be more popular. For example, in US, Apple Pay is actually really popular, and Apple Pay, in fact, harms nobody. Right? It works closely with everybody else in the field. So I believe that's another approach as well, Marcus.
Okay, we have a brief comment from Larry. Sorry, some Cleveland, and then we have a question here. Please, Cleveland, you would yeah.
Yeah, I'll give a brief one, just really quick. Bottom line is, people are going to use information to make money at the end of the day. And what we're going to see is that they're going to figure out ways to monetize data. And fundamentally, there's no way to actually stop or monitor that. So it's part of the ecosystem, and that's all I wanted to add. But let's jump into the question.
Okay, perfect. Daniele, we got a question here involving Brazilian reality, but I would like to ask you to ask that. In countries with populations like the Brazilian one, where people do not even have a bank account, either for lack of knowledge or trust, how can technology overcome such barriers?
Well, it's a complicating question, because not only about payments, it's also about the reach of digital devices, right? So smartphones or any other device that will enable that thing. And you have good things like Boleto in Brazil, right? Or other ways that give customers the possibility to reach, but that is not digital. Things that have worked really well here in Italy is the delivering of physical prepaid cards in some ways, which had a cost, but in some ways, especially now, the Italian government is trying to subsidize for the help that needs to come with post-COVID, right? So that could be a way, but obviously you'd have to go, this question, which is directed to the Brazilian market specific, you have to go into the regulations as well, because that becomes really complicated when you're dealing with remote areas, and the logistics may become complicated as well.
Okay, Folks, unfortunately, we are ahead of time. We have just few minutes to conclude our session, and I will be asking from each of you just a final statement, sharing your thought about mobile payment and the future, how this will be changing reality and the role of the different agents all over the world. Let's start with you, Larry, please.
Okay, thank you, Marcus. It's very nice to talk to you. I would like to see that in the mobile payment field, it's always business driven and it's always technology driven. And we see new technologies happening every day. Today, for example, we see a great trend to biological payment, especially for facial recognition. Here in China, actually, we have massive development already. Without pandemic situation, I would say recognition will be everywhere already. I'm sure that in the coming years there will be new technology in this field. The trend towards mobility, towards convenience, and more security is always there. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Larry. Daniel, your final statement, please.
I think what I would like to conclude with this is not about if, but when mobile payments will definitely come into place for everyone, right? So we're seeing all sorts of different countries, even the BRIC countries which are coming up and are taking advantage of mobile payments. I think Nexi in Italy especially is at the forefront of helping that. We will continue to do that on all fronts. Leveraging what Cleveland was saying earlier on, so helping the bank as a fulcrum of everything and just speeding the time to market and improving customer experience, because that at the end of the day is always the main factor.
Cleveland, up to you.
And cost.
Yeah, so fundamentally, what I talked about earlier is it comes down to 3 C's: convergence, compliance, cost. Where's that future in mobile payments? The future is actually, let's forget all this. It's the young people. It's the young generation. It's the generations that are coming up, and the technology is just part of their lives. And as technology becomes part of young people's lives, they're now using their imagination to create very unique ways to utilize mobile devices within commerce. So the future, what I want to leave it with is I want to leave it with the young people, the new generations, their innovation and their creativity is really, from my standpoint, the driver for the future. And that's what we do at PayScout. We innovate, drive for the future.
Okay, folks, I really would like to thank you to be with us in this special session from Campus Party. As you perceive, mobile and digital payments are beyond technology. It's a way how society is changing, consumer behavior, the role of the different agents, and the perception that the power is moving from companies to the omni-consumer, especially the new generations, as was just mentioned by Cleveland, because they are bringing the market transformation. Thank you so much. See you soon again. Thank you so much, Daniele, Larry, and Cleveland.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. Have a nice afternoon.
Bye.